I was stacking pallets in Section C when my phone buzzed against my thigh. Third time in 10 minutes. The warehouse was loud, forklifts beeping, conveyor belts humming, guys shouting over the noise, so I'd missed the first 2 calls. Unknown number, probably spam. But something made me swipe to answer. The woman's voice was calm, professional, not the robotic cadence of a telemarketer. "Is this Daniel Reyes?" "Yeah, who's this?" I replied. "Your wife is in room 216 at the Ridgecrest Hotel with another man. Right now," she said matter-of-factly. The pallet jack in my hands suddenly felt too heavy. I set it down, my mind scrambling to process what I'd just heard. "What? Who is this?" "Someone who thought you should know," the woman answered. "Lady, you've got the wrong—" I started to protest. She cut me off. "Check your phone in 30 seconds. The line went dead. I stood there in the middle of the warehouse, sweating under the fluorescent lights, holding my phone like it might explode. Around me, the familiar chaos continued, Rick shouting at someone about a missed delivery, the crack of pallets being dropped, the distant sound of the loading dock doors rolling up and down. 5 years I'd worked here. 5 years of the same routine, the same faces, the same rhythm that had become as natural as breathing. Marissa would never. Not my Marissa. We'd been together since we were 17, married for 8 years. She was at her mom's today, helping with some spring cleaning project. She'd kissed me goodbye this morning, her hair still messy from sleep, wearing that old Northwestern sweatshirt she'd stolen from me in college. My phone buzzed, a video message. My hands were shaking as I opened it. The timestamp showed today, 1:47 p.m., just 2 hours ago. There she was, my wife, walking through a hotel parking lot in the yellow sundress I'd bought her for our anniversary last month. Her hair was done up the way she wore it for special occasions, and she was laughing at something someone was saying off camera. Then a man's arm came around her waist, muscular, tanned, definitely not me, and she leaned into him like she belonged there. The camera followed them to a door marked 216. She had her key card ready, like she'd done this before. The man's hand slid down to rest on her lower back as she swiped the card, and she looked up at him with an expression I recognized. It was the same look she used to give me when we were dating, when we couldn't keep our hands off each other. They disappeared inside. The video ended. I watched it again, and again, each time hoping I'd see something different, some explanation that would make this make sense. But it was Marissa, my Marissa, in a hotel room with another man in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon when she was supposed to be helping her mother organize closets. The warehouse noise faded into background static. My chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing my rib cage. I'd read about this moment in books, seen it in movies, the moment when your whole world shifts sideways and nothing looks the same anymore. But they never captured the physical sensation of it. The way your vision goes a little blurry around the edges, the way your mouth goes dry, the way your hands shake so badly you almost drop your phone. But underneath the shock, underneath the hurt that was still working its way through my system like poison, something else was settling in. Something cold and calculating that I didn't recognize in myself. I pocketed my phone and walked across the warehouse floor to Rick's office. He was hunched over his desk, squinting at shipping manifests through his reading glasses. "Rick, I need to take some emergency leave," I announced. He looked up at me over his glasses. Rick had been my supervisor for 5 years, and he knew me well enough to read the signs. The carefully controlled voice. The way I was standing too straight, too still. "Everything okay, Danny?" he asked with concern. "Number. But it will be," I replied evenly. He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "Take what you need. We'll cover your roots." I was already turning to leave when he called after me. "Danny, don't do anything stupid." I paused in his doorway. "I won't." Walking back through the warehouse felt like moving underwater. The familiar sounds and smells, diesel fumes, cardboard dust, the metallic tang of the loading bay, seemed to come from very far away. I clocked out, grabbed my jacket from my locker, and walked to my truck in the parking lot. I sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at my phone. Then I made 2 calls. The first was to Paul and Cynthia Holloway, Marissa's parents. They'd welcomed me into their family when I was barely 18, treated me like the son they never had. Paul had taught me to work on engines in his garage. Cynthia always made sure there was a place for me at their Sunday dinner table. They loved Marissa more than anything in the world, but they'd raised her to believe in loyalty, in family, in doing the right thing even when it was hard. "Cynthia? It's Daniel," I said when she answered. "Listen, Marissa's not doing well. She's at the Ridgecrest Hotel, and I think she really needs you and Paul there, both of you." "What? Daniel, what's wrong? Why is she at a hotel?" Cynthia's voice was filled with maternal worry. I let the pause stretch out, let her maternal instincts fill in the blanks. "Just come. Please. Room 216. She needs her parents right now." The second call was to fate, or justice, or whatever you call it when you decide to stop protecting someone who's been lying to your face. I started the truck and headed toward the Ridgecrest Hotel, where my wife was about to learn that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The drive to the hotel gave me 23 minutes to think, and for the first time since that phone call, my mind felt clear, sharp, like someone had adjusted the focus on a camera that had been slightly blurry for months. I thought about the Holloways as I drove through afternoon traffic. Paul was a big man, a mechanic who'd built his own shop from nothing and still got his hands dirty every day at 62. He'd taught me everything I knew about engines, about fixing things that were broken, about the satisfaction of honest work. But more than that, he'd taught me about integrity, about being the kind of man who keeps his word, who shows up when he says he will, who doesn't take what isn't his. Cynthia was the heart of their family. She still made Sunday gravy from scratch, still insisted everyone turn off their phones during dinner, still signed her text messages, "Love, Mom," even to me. She'd raised Marissa to believe in family values, in the sacred nature of marriage vows, in the idea that your word was your bond. They'd be devastated, but they needed to know who their daughter really was. My phone had buzzed twice during the drive, both calls from Marissa. I let them go to voicemail. She was probably wondering why I was calling her parents, why I wasn't answering her calls. Maybe she was getting nervous about her girls' day out alibi. Good. She should be nervous. The Ridgecrest was a mid-level business hotel, the kind of place that catered to traveling salesmen and conference attendees. Not cheap enough to be seedy, not expensive enough to be memorable. Perfect for what Marissa thought she was doing. I wondered how many other Tuesday afternoons she'd spent here, how long this had been going on, how many lies I'd swallowed without even tasting them. I parked across the street where I could see the main entrance and waited. The Holloways drove a silver Camry that Paul had bought used and maintained perfectly for the past 6 years. When I saw it pull into the hotel parking lot, my pulse quickened. I watched them get out of the car. Paul was wearing his good jeans and a button-down shirt, the outfit Cynthia made him wear when they went anywhere nicer than the hardware store. She had on her navy dress with the small flowers, the one she wore to church. They both looked confused, worried. Cynthia clutched her purse against her chest the way she did when she was anxious. Paul checked his phone as they walked toward the hotel entrance, probably texting me, asking for more information about what was wrong with their daughter. They had no idea what they were about to walk into. No idea that in the next few minutes, their image of their perfect daughter was going to shatter like glass hitting concrete. I felt a moment of guilt watching them disappear through the hotel's glass doors. They didn't deserve this, but neither did I. And if Marissa had been thinking about her parents' feelings, maybe she wouldn't have been in room 216 with another man. I waited exactly 3 minutes. Long enough for them to take the elevator to the second floor, find room 216, knock on the door. Long enough for Marissa to answer, expecting room service or maybe housekeeping. Long enough for that first moment of confusion to register on all their faces. Then I got out of my truck and followed them inside. The hotel lobby was generic business class. Beige carpet, fake leather furniture, the smell of industrial air freshener trying to cover up years of cigarette smoke. The elevator seemed to take forever. When the doors finally opened on the second floor, I could hear voices coming from down the hall. Raised voices, confusion, fear. I walked toward room 216, my footsteps silent on the carpeted hallway. The door was standing open, and I could see into the room, see Marissa in a white hotel bathrobe, her face white with shock. See her parents standing in the doorway, trying to process what they were seeing. See a half-dressed man scrambling for his clothes in the background. This was it. The moment when lies met truth, when consequences caught up with choices, when the woman I'd loved for 11 years destroyed herself in front of the people whose respect she valued most. I stepped into the doorway behind the Holloways, and 4 sets of eyes turned toward me. But I only looked at one person. "Hello, Marissa," I said quietly. The silence in that hotel room was suffocating. 4 people breathing the same air, processing the same devastating truth, but experiencing it completely differently. Marissa stood frozen in the doorway, her hotel bathrobe tied hastily around her waist. Her hair was messed up, her lipstick gone, and there was a flush across her chest that I recognized from 8 years of marriage. She'd been expecting room service, maybe housekeeping. Instead, she was facing her parents and her husband, all of whom now knew exactly what kind of woman she really was. Behind her, scrambling to pull on his pants, was Bryce Carter. I didn't know his name yet, but I could see everything I needed to know. Muscular, tanned, the kind of guy who spent serious money on his haircut and his teeth. Everything I wasn't. He was panicking, looking around the room like he might find an escape route that didn't involve walking past the 3 people blocking the doorway. Paul Holloway's face had gone through several stages of emotion in the space of 30 seconds. First, confusion. Why was his daughter in a hotel in the middle of the afternoon? Then concern. Was she sick? Was she hurt? Then the slow, terrible understanding as he took in the bathrobe, the unmade bed, the half-naked man behind her. Now he looked like he might have a heart attack. Paul's voice cracked as he spoke her name. "Marissa, what is this?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted between her parents and me, looking for someone who might help her explain this away. But there was no explanation. No story that could make this okay. "Daddy, She finally found her voice, but it came out as a whisper. "It was a mistake, just once. I swear it was just once." That was when I knew she still didn't understand. Still thought this was about the sex, about the physical betrayal. She had no idea that the deeper wound was the lying, the careful deception, the way she'd looked me in the eye every morning and evening while living a completely different life. Bryce finally got his pants on and stepped forward, trying to take control of the situation. "Look, I know this looks bad, but—" He never finished the sentence. Paul Holloway's fist caught him in the jaw and sent him stumbling backward into the wall. For a 62-year-old mechanic, Paul still had plenty of power in his right hook. Paul's voice was quiet, deadly. Don't say another word." Bryce slumped against the wall, holding his jaw, his eyes wide with shock. He probably wasn't used to consequences, probably used to charming his way out of situations, making jokes, playing it off. But Paul Holloway wasn't laughing. "Do you have a wife?" Paul asked him coldly. Bryce nodded, still holding his jaw. "Kids?" Paul pressed. Another nod. Paul's boot caught him in the ribs, not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to make a point. "Get out. Get out before I drag you to your wife myself and let her know what kind of man she married." Bryce grabbed his shirt and shoes and stumbled toward the door, squeezing past us without making eye contact. The door slammed behind him, leaving just family in the room. What was left of our family? Cynthia hadn't said a word since walking into the room. She was staring at her daughter like she was looking at a stranger. The woman who'd raised Marissa to believe in marriage vows, in family loyalty, in the kind of moral character that didn't bend when it was convenient. Marissa whispered desperately, reaching toward her mother. "Mom, please. I can explain." "Explain what?" I spoke for the first time since entering the room, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears, calm, empty. "Explain how you've been lying to my face for months? Explain how you kissed me goodbye this morning and came here to screw another man? Explain how you made me look like a fool to everyone we know?" Tears were streaming down her face now. "Daniel, please. It doesn't mean anything. I love you. I've always loved you." I shook my head firmly. "Number, you loved the security I gave you. You loved having someone to come home to when you were done playing games. But you don't love me. You don't respect me. And you sure as hell don't respect the vows we made." She was sobbing now, reaching for me, but I stepped back. I'd seen enough tears, heard enough apologies. They didn't change what she'd done. They didn't erase the months of lies. "You can keep the robe," I said with finality. "Just don't come back to my house. We're done." "Daniel, no," she pleaded, but I was already turning to leave. I had nothing else to say to her. We were finished, and we both knew it. Behind me, I heard Paul's voice, quiet and final. "You've embarrassed all of us, Marissa. Don't come home to us either. You're not our daughter anymore." The last thing I heard as I walked down the hotel hallway was the sound of Marissa crying alone in that room, the door closing on the life she'd chosen to throw away. 3 days later, I learned the identity of my anonymous caller. Renee Carter knocked on my apartment door at 7 in the evening, holding a manila folder and wearing the tired expression of someone who'd been carrying secrets too long. "You're Daniel Reyes," she said. It wasn't a question. "And you're the woman who called me," I replied, recognizing her voice. She nodded. "Can I come in?" "I think we should talk." My apartment was barely furnished. I'd taken only what I needed when I left the house, leaving everything else for Marissa to deal with. A couch, a TV, basic kitchen supplies. It looked like a place where someone was starting over, which I suppose it was. Renee sat on my couch and opened her folder. Inside were photographs, bank statements, credit card receipts, and what looked like a timeline written in neat handwriting. "My husband is Bryce Carter," she explained. "The man who was with your wife." I studied her face. She was probably in her early 30s, attractive in a quiet way, with the kind of intelligence in her eyes that told you she didn't miss much. "How long have you known?" "About Marissa specifically? 3 weeks? About his affairs in general? 6 months?" she answered matter-of-factly. She spread the documents across my coffee table like evidence in a trial. Because that's what this was, I realized. She'd been building a case. "Bryce thinks he's smart," she continued, "but he's lazy about covering his tracks. He started going to the gym at odd hours, paying more attention to his appearance, buying cologne, classic signs, so I started paying attention too. The bank statements showed charges at the Ridgecrest Hotel going back 4 months. Always on Tuesday afternoons, always the same room rate. The credit card receipts showed purchases at Victoria's Secret, at restaurants I knew Marissa had never mentioned eating at. "I hired a private investigator," Renee said. "Got photos of him with 3 different women over the past 6 months. Your wife was the most recent." She handed me a photograph of Marissa and Bryce holding hands in the hotel parking lot. They looked comfortable together, familiar, like they'd been doing this for a while. "Why didn't you just confront your husband?" I asked. "Because confronting him privately would have given him a chance to manipulate the situation, to make promises he wouldn't keep, to turn it around and make it my fault somehow." She gathered the papers back into her folder. I wanted justice, not drama. I wanted consequences that would stick. So you called me, I said, understanding. I researched your wife first, found out about her family, her social media posts about being blessed with such a wonderful marriage. I knew that exposing her publicly, in front of her parents, would be more devastating than any private confrontation. I had to admire her thoroughness. And your husband? Lost his job yesterday. Turns out one of his other affairs was with a coworker, and when that woman's husband called the company, they decided Bryce was a liability. He's also lost access to our joint accounts, and I've filed for divorce. Full custody of our kids. She stood up, smoothing down her skirt. I didn't call you to hurt you, Daniel. I called you because you deserve to know the truth, and because I knew you'd handle it the right way. What makes you think that? I asked curiously. I talked to people at your warehouse. They all said the same thing. You're decent, honest, loyal, the kind of man who deserves better than what your wife was giving you. She paused at my door. I'm sorry you had to go through this, but I'm not sorry about how it ended. After she left, I sat in my quiet apartment thinking about the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge was emotional, immediate, satisfying in the moment but ultimately hollow. Justice was patient, thorough, and permanent. Renee Carter had understood that distinction. She hadn't just wanted to hurt the people who'd hurt her. She'd wanted to restore the natural order, to make sure that actions had appropriate consequences. I pulled out my phone and looked at the missed calls from Marissa. 17 in the past 3 days, plus dozens of text messages I hadn't read. I deleted them all and blocked her number. Some doors once closed should stay that way. 6 months later, I was putting together a bicycle in Rick Nolan's garage, teaching his 8-year-old son Tommy about the importance of tightening bolts properly. Paul Holloway would have been proud. I was passing on the lessons he'd taught me about craftsmanship, about taking time to do things right. Tommy watched me work with the wrench and asked, "Why do you have to make it so tight, Uncle Danny?" "Because if it's not tight enough, it'll come loose when you need it most," I explained, "and then you'll crash." "Like with people?" he asked innocently. "Kids see everything." "Yeah, Tommy, like with people." My life had settled into a new rhythm. The apartment I'd found 3 days after leaving the hotel had become home by now. I'd bought real furniture, hung pictures on the walls, planted herbs in pots by the kitchen window. It was smaller than the house I'd shared with Marissa, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every plate and cup, every book on the shelf represented a conscious choice rather than accumulated history. Work had become a refuge. Rick's wife had started inviting me to their family dinners after I'd helped fix their washing machine a month after the hotel incident, and I'd become Uncle Danny to their 3 kids. It wasn't the family I'd planned to have, but it was real, built on honesty rather than convenience. I'd heard through mutual friends that Marissa was living alone in a studio apartment across town, working at a job that barely covered her rent. Her parents still weren't speaking to her. The community that had once embraced her now treated her like a cautionary tale. I didn't take satisfaction in her circumstances, but I didn't feel guilty about them either. She'd made her choices. Now she was living with the consequences. Renee Carter had started her own private investigation business, helping other betrayed spouses uncover the truth about their marriages. We met for coffee occasionally, 2 people who'd survived the same storm and understood each other's scars. There was nothing romantic between us. We were both too busy rebuilding to think about that. But there was a friendship based on mutual respect and shared experience. Bryce had tried to reach out to me once, wanting to have a man-to-man conversation about what had happened. I'd ignored his call, just like I'd ignored his attempt to contact Paul Holloway. Some men never understand that certain violations can't be explained away. "There," I said, tightening the last bolt on Tommy's bike. "Perfect. Want to take it for a test ride?" Tommy climbed on and pedaled around the driveway, grinning like he'd just discovered flight. Rick watched from the porch with pride and gratitude. Rick called out, "Thanks for doing this, Danny. Kid's been wanting that bike fixed for months." "No problem," I replied, packing up the tools. "That's what family's for." Family. Not the one I'd expected to have, but the one I'd chosen. The one that had chosen me back. As I drove home through the evening, I thought about foundations, about the difference between building something on lies and building it on truth, about the strange peace that comes from knowing exactly where you stand with everyone in your life. My phone buzzed with a text from Cynthia Holloway. "Danny, thinking of you today. Hope you're well. Love, Mom." She still signed her texts the same way, still considered me family, even though her daughter had forfeited that right. Some bonds survive even the worst betrayals. I pulled into my parking space and sat in the truck for a moment, looking up at my apartment windows glowing warm in the darkness. Tomorrow was Thursday, middle of the week, another day of honest work, another evening of simple contentment. Some people might have called it a small life, but I'd learned the difference between small and simple, between settling and choosing. I'd chosen truth over comfort, dignity over familiarity, respect over history. And for the first time in years, when I turned off the lights and settled into sleep, I didn't have to wonder what lies tomorrow might bring. Because I'd finally learned to build my life on a foundation that wouldn't crack under pressure. Some foundations, once properly built, last forever. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.